In a skyscraper where billion-dollar deals were signed every day, there was one man no one ever noticed. A quiet black janitor pushing his cart through marble hallways. He had lost his own son, he had lost his wife, and he had lost his will to live. Yet one small, trembling girl, the billionaire's daughter who hadn't spoken in 3 months, would change everything, not with words, but with a single handmade teddy bear. Lionel Hartman had once been the light of the Hartman skyline. The little girl who ran through marble hallways with arms wide, pretending the polished floors were clouds. Her laughter used to echo through boardrooms and brighten even the stern faces of executives who bowed to her mother's power. She was the sunshine of a billion-dollar empire. Then, one rainy evening, that sunlight vanished. The plane that carried her father down from a business trip never landed. News anchors spoke in careful voices. Words like turbulence and technical failure filled the air. Camille Hartman held her daughter tightly as the world fell silent around them. But Lionel didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't ask questions. She simply stopped speaking, stopped smiling, stopped being present in the world she once loved. The best doctors flew in from across the globe. Psychologists and child specialists filled her room with calm voices and colorful toys. She needs time. She's shutting down to protect herself. We can't force healing. One by one, they gave up. Their gentle optimism faded into professional defeat. Soon, the whispers began. She's unreachable. She's lost in her own mind. There's nothing anyone can do. Even Camille, a woman who controlled empires, negotiated million-dollar deals before breakfast, and inspired thousands, felt powerless in front of her own child. At night, when the long corridors of the mansion stood empty, she sat by Lionel's bedside, brushing away her hair, searching for signs of the little girl who used to call her mommy. But Lionel's eyes remained distant, as if she were living on the other side of a wall no one else could see. The world called her untreatable. But in truth, she wasn't sick. She was shattered, and no one had figured out how to piece her heart back together yet. Noah Carter moved through the world like a whisper no one noticed. In the marble halls of the Hartman building, among the polished glass and million-dollar art pieces, he was just another shadow pushing a cleaning cart, just another uniform, just another invisible worker wiping fingerprints off perfection. But once upon a time, he had been more than that. Noah had been a preschool teacher, the kind children trusted instantly, the kind who knelt to their level, tying shoelaces and listening carefully to stories that made no sense but meant everything. His classroom had been filled with handmade paper clouds, painted suns, and tiny chairs that shook with laughter every single day. He used to believe the world was built through small moments. A shared cookie, a silly song, a warm hug at the right time. That he had believed in beginnings. And most of all, he had believed in his son. Micah was 5 years old. Curious eyes, dimpled cheeks, hands that always seemed to be reaching for possibility. Every night, Noah helped him build something new out of scraps of cardboard or old wooden pieces. Small cars, crooked airplanes, spinning tops. Micah adored watching his father's hands transform nothing into magic. "Daddy, you can make anything," he once said, wrapping his arms around Noah's neck. That memory still haunted him. The accident had happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that should have been folded quietly into memory. A distracted driver, a speeding car, a sidewalk that was too close to the road. Everything after that had smeared into a blur of sirens and doctors' voices and the unbearable sound of his own breath breaking in the hospital hallway. Micah never woke up. His small hand had cooled in Noah's trembling grip while machines went silent around them. Something inside Noah went silent too. His wife, Aisha, had tried to stand beside him. She tried to cry with him, to hold him, to remind him they were still alive. But grief settled into their home like a heavy fog. Every corner was haunted by the echo of their child's laughter. The little shoes by the door, the crayon-stained table, the half-finished toy waiting on the shelf. One night, Noah came home to find her side of the bed empty. She had left a note, "I don't know how to live with the absence of him. I need to disappear before it consumes me." And just like that, Noah lost her too. The man who once shaped young minds every day could no longer step inside a classroom. The laughter cut too deep. The innocence was too sharp a reminder. Slowly, he withdrew from the life he had built and chose one where no one would look twice at him, where no one would expect anything from him. He became a janitor, a position no one questioned, no one admired, no one truly saw. He was given night shifts for offices that smelled like money and ambition. Tall buildings filled with people who left crumbs of their lives behind for him to clean up. Coffee stains, smeared fingerprints, forgotten scraps of paper. It was simple, quiet, lonely, but in that loneliness, he worked with his hands again. Every night, long after the lights dimmed, Noah pulled tiny scraps of wood and discarded packaging from the trash. He carved little animals with a pocket knife that had once belonged to his grandfather. He twisted pipe cleaners into tiny figures. He made wooden trains, lopsided giraffes, toy boats that could float in a bathtub. He made them all for Micah. A shrine slowly built itself in the corner of his small apartment, not out of grief alone, but out of love that had nowhere else to go. He sat at his worn table, candle flickering, surrounded by the silent company of tiny handmade toys. "I still remember," he'd whisper to the empty space. "I still build for you." To the rest of the world, Noah Carter was invisible. They never saw the father who still tucked his son into his heart each night. They never saw the teacher who still believed broken things could be fixed. They never saw the gentle giant whose hands could heal more than just broken floors. And maybe that was for the best, because if the world had really looked at him, they might have realized that sometimes the ones who had already lost everything were the only ones capable of giving everything. Night had swallowed the Hartman building whole. Long after the last executive had left, after the elevators had gone silent and the city's noise softened into a distant hum beyond tinted glass, the corporate empire stood still, motionless, watchful, a monument to power and loneliness all in one. Noah Carter pushed his cleaning cart slowly across the polished floor of the upper-level hallway, his footsteps barely making a sound. He preferred these hours, the quiet ones. No one asking questions, no eyes lingering on him. No reminders of who he used to be that he wiped a glass display. The reflection showing only a tired man with kind eyes and a body worn thin from grief. He turned away quickly, not interested in seeing himself any longer than necessary. That was when he heard a faint, broken sound, like a breath being pulled apart at a sob. Noah froze. The sound didn't come from an office or a conference room. It came from farther down the hallway, near the tall marble columns that framed the private executive wing. No one was supposed to be here at this hour, especially not a child. He hesitated. Every instinct told him to keep moving, to mind his own business. That was the rule of his new life. Disappear, endure, repeat. But the crying came again, sharper this time, fragile and frightened, like a bird trapped in a storm. Noah set down his cloth. With gentle steps, he walked toward the sound until he saw her. Lina Hartman sat on the cold floor, knees pulled tight against her chest, her back pressed against a marble column twice her size. Her small fingers were tangled in her hair. Her face was red, wet with silent tears that kept falling even when her voice fell quiet. She stared at nothing, not even noticing he was there up close. She looked even more breakable than the rumors had ever suggested. She wasn't a billionaire's daughter in that moment. She was just a lost little girl. Noah did not speak. He didn't say her name. Didn't ask what was wrong. Didn't ask if she needed help. He remembered all too well how empty words could be when pain had taken over. How every "it'll be all right" felt like another L-I-E-S-O instead. He crouched down a few feet away from her. Slowly, carefully, he reached into the side pocket of his utility bag. Inside was something he had made only the night before, his hands working without thought, guided by memory and longing. A small teddy bear stitched from soft, leftover fabric, its round belly slightly uneven, its head tilted in a way that made it look curious. It wasn't perfect. None of his toys ever were, but each one held a piece of his heart. Noah placed the bear gently on the floor between them, then slid it a little closer to her, close enough that she could reach it if she wanted, but far enough that it didn't intrude on her space. Then he sat back against the other side of the column. That he didn't look at her, he simply waited. Minutes passed in silence. The quiet, louder than any words would have been. Lioness sob softened, then slowed, and then stopped. Noah could feel the change in the air, the fragile shift, like the moment just before sunrise. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her glance down at the small bear in front of her. She didn't touch it right away. She only studied it, as if trying to decide what kind of magic had placed it there. Her fingers moved, trembling, inching closer. When she finally picked it up, her hands tightened around it. She pressed it against her chest, buried her face into its soft fabric. And for the first time in 3 months, Lionel Hartman took a full, steady breath. Noah's own throat tightened. He kept his eyes on the polished floor, afraid that even a single movement might shatter the moment. Then, in a voice so soft it almost disappeared into the walls, he heard her speak. What secret does it know? The world seemed to stop. Noah didn't move, didn't dare react too quickly. The sound of her voice, shaky and unsure, echoed in his mind like a holy thing. She talked, he thought, barely breathing. Slowly, he turned his head just enough to look at her. She wasn't staring at him. She was staring at the teddy bear. Again, she whispered, this time a little clearer. What secret does it know? Noah swallowed the lump at his throat. He knows the secret of hands that never stop loving, he said quietly, even when the heart feels too tired to keep going. Lionel's fingers brushed over the bear's crooked stitching. Her tiny thumb traced the seam along its ear, as if feeling the hours that had gone into its creation. Did you make him? She asked. Yes, he answered simply. Why? Her eyes lifted then, finding him for the very first time. In them, he saw the same kind of broken sky he had seen in the mirror for years. Because someone I loved very much liked bears, he said. Her lips trembled, but they did not break into tears this time. I don't like anything anymore, she murmured. He nodded. That's okay. You don't have to. She was silent for a while. Then she asked, can he stay with me? Noah felt his heart shift. He was always meant to, he replied. Lionel hugged the bear tighter, rocking slightly as she leaned her forehead back against the cold column, her breathing matching its slow rhythm, as if the small, handmade thing had become her anchor to the world. In that quiet, in that stillness, two broken souls sat on opposite sides of a towering structure built by wealth and power. And yet, for the first time in a very long while, neither of them felt alone. A grieving father who had lost his child, a grieving daughter who had lost her father. They didn't say it out loud. They didn't have to. Their hearts had already recognized each other. And somewhere, deep inside the silence that had once imprisoned them both, a tiny, fragile piece of healing began to grow. The first time Camille Hartman heard that her daughter had spoken, she didn't believe it. Words had become myths in that house. Things people wished for, but no longer expected. The report came from security first, delivered awkwardly through a tense morning phone call. Ma'am, it was the janitor. He was with her in the executive wing. She spoke to him. Silence bloomed on the other end of the line. The janitor? Camille repeated. Minutes later, she stood outside the monitored hallway, watching from behind one-way glass as Lioness sat on the floor, holding a small, handmade teddy bear. And beside her sat a tall, quiet man in a worn uniform, his posture gentle, respectful, careful not to dominate her fragile space. He wasn't talking much. Mostly he was listening to Lioness breathing, to her whispers, to the careful world she had slowly begun to re-enter. Camille had spent millions trying to open that door, and somehow he had simply knocked. Later that day, Camille approached him personally for the first time. Noah had assumed it would be the moment he lost his job. He stood nervously in the vast office that had once belonged to Lionel's father, hands folded in front of him, eyes fixed on the floor. I should not have been there, he said quietly before she could even speak. If I crossed a boundary, I will leave. I never meant. You helped my daughter speak again. Camille interrupted, voice low but controlled. There is no boundary you could cross that would erase that. He looked up then, startled. I don't need you to replace her father, she added, softer now. I don't need you to be anything more than what you already were in that moment. She closed the distance between them. but I would like you to stay close to her as a friend. Nothing more, nothing less. Noah hesitated. People like Camille Hartman did not ask for fragile things. They commanded them, only if she wants it. He replied, as though they let Lina decide. And she chose him. From that day on, Noah was no longer just a janitor wandering unnoticed through marble halls. He became a quiet presence beside Lina during therapy sessions. He sat on the floor with her during silent lunches. He brought small handmade toys, not to distract her, but to invite her back into a world that felt safe again. She trusted him, and trust was dangerous in a world that fed on gossip. It didn't take long before the whispers outside the building turned into headlines. The billionaire's daughter forms strange bond with black janitor. Mother allows staff member unsupervised access to traumatized child. IS the Hartman heiress in danger inside her own home. News trucks lined the street. Pundits argued on television. Comment sections filled with poison. The internet dissected Noah's past, his face, his grief, his every move. Strangers decided who he was without ever hearing his voice. The world did what it always did when it didn't understand something gentle. IT tried to destroy it. Board members stormed Camille's office, threatening liability and brand damage. Sponsors questioned their partnerships. Lawyers warned her of risk. Even her own relatives whispered that she had lost her mind. "You are risking everything," they told her. Camille looked at the security monitors and saw Lina laughing. Truly laughing. For the first time in months, as Noah helped her make a tiny paper boat. "I am protecting the only thing that truly matters," she answered. But the world refused to listen. One afternoon, when Noah arrived for his shift, he found two police officers waiting for him in the lobby. "Are you Noah Carter?" One of them asked. "Yes. We need you to come with us." Panic rippled through the building as employees stopped and stared. Cameras from nearby reporters zoomed in through glass windows. Everyone was watching the janitor now, not because he had done something wrong, but because he was easy to doubt. Upstairs, Lina sensed the shift before anyone said a word. She felt the familiar tightness crawling back into her chest. The fear, the memory of losing someone all over again. She ran, past confused staff, past scared therapists, past the wide-open doors of power and money, running until her small legs gave out inside the one room that still smelled like him. Her father's old office, IT, had remained untouched since the accident. His chair, his desk, the faint echo of his cologne trapped in leather and wood. She pulled herself onto the window seat, curling into a ball, clutching the teddy Noah had given her. "If you're a ghost." "I found your room," she whispered to the empty space. Tears slipped down her cheeks, quiet and relentless. "I don't want to lose him too." Downstairs, Camille watched everything from the monitors as Noah stood calmly between the officers. He did not resist, did not beg, did not defend himself. He simply asked one question. "Is the child safe?" The officers exchanged a confused glance. "Yes, she's with her mother." His eyes softened at the answer. "Then I'm ready." But Camille was already moving. "Get your hands off him," she commanded when she entered the lobby, her voice slicing through the tension. "You are detaining a man who saved my daughter's life in ways medicine could not." "This is procedure," one officer said hesitantly. "We receive a report from the press." Camille snapped. "Not from my child. Not from me. Release him. Now." Upstairs, the door to Lina's father's office creaked open. Noah stepped inside quietly after being escorted there by trembling staff members. He saw her on the window ledge, eyes red, shoulders shaking. He didn't approach. He just sat on the floor like he had before, back against the opposite wall. "You found the quietest room in the whole building," he said gently. Lina didn't turn her head. "He used to sit at that desk and pretend he hated his job," she murmured. "But he always came home happy." Noah nodded. "That means he was doing it for love, not money." She looked at the bear, then at him. "I thought you were going to disappear," she said. "I wouldn't leave without saying goodbye," he answered. "And I don't plan on leaving at all, unless you tell me to." Silence. Then, slowly, she slid from the ledge and walked toward him. She sat beside him, resting her head gently on his shoulder. In that sacred, broken office where grief had once ruled, Lina Hartman didn't find a ghost. she found healing. And outside the thick glass walls, the world could rage, shout, judge, and try to tear them apart all it wanted. Because inside that room, something far stronger than wealth or reputation had taken root. Trust, connection, and the beginning of a family, forged not by blood, but by survival, love, and the impossible comfort of being understood. Grief does not vanish. It does not disappear like fog in the morning sun or fade like a passing shadow. It remains, living quietly inside the heart, shaping breaths, shaping choices, shaping the way a soul learns to move forward again. But sometimes, if guided with love, grief can become something else, something holy, something healing. From the quiet bond between a billionaire's daughter and a broken single father, a dream was born. Not in a boardroom, not in a meeting with lawyers or executives, but on the floor of a silent office, beside an old teddy bear stitched with trembling hands. They called it Micah's Hope. Noah did not choose the name for recognition. He chose it because his son's name had carried too much silence for too long. And now, that name would carry comfort instead. The first center opened in an abandoned community building a few miles away from the city's glittering skyline. It wasn't perfect. The paint was chipped. The windows were old. But inside it lived something the world desperately needed. Understanding that a room full of small chairs, a shelf full of handmade toys, walls painted with suns, clouds, and wide-open hands reaching for one another. Children who had lost parents. Children who had lost siblings. Children who had lost the feeling of safety. They came in broken, quiet, withdrawn, just like Lina had once been. Noah never forced a word out of them, that he simply sat on the floor and waited. Beside him, Lina sat too, her small hand resting gently around her teddy bear, her eyes kind and knowing. She did not speak much at first. She only smiled. She offered the bear to trembling hands. She shared the quiet. And somehow, that was enough. Point one center became 2, then 5, then 10. Camille Hartman, a woman once fueled only by numbers and power, used her fortune for something that finally felt like purpose. She converted old buildings, funded therapists, created safe spaces across the country for grieving families, not as hospitals, not as institutions, but as homes for healing. Soon, Micah's Hope stood in cities and small towns alike. Over 30 centers spread across the map, each one a sanctuary for the broken. Parents walked in lost and hopeless and walked out holding hands again. Children who had forgotten how to laugh relearned the sound of their own voices. And the girl who had once been called untreatable became the brightest light in every room she entered. Lina knelt beside crying children, just like she had once been. She placed a bear between them. She didn't try to fix their pain. She didn't offer promises she couldn't keep. She only whispered the words that had saved her life. It's okay. He helped me too. Sometimes she meant her father. Sometimes she meant Noah. Sometimes she meant both. And Noah, standing in the background, watching the impossible unfold, finally understood something that had once felt unreachable. Micah had never truly left him. His son's love had simply grown bigger than one small life that had become a shelter for thousands in the end. It wasn't wealth that made the Hartman name immortal. Wasn't power, fame, or headlines. That was a black single dad janitor who chose kindness over bitterness and a little girl who learned to speak again, together proving that even the most shattered hearts can turn their pain into purpose and their loss into a living, breathing miracle. Noah didn't save Lina by fixing her. He saved her by sitting beside her, while letting her grieve, while staying when everyone else walked away. And in return, he found a new family, a new purpose, and a new reason to live. Because sometimes the greatest miracles don't wear white coats or hold degrees. Sometimes they carry a mop in one hand and a teddy bear in the other.